Also, I have to mention that these are grafted. This is the graft right here. They're grafted to either Rosa multiflora or Dr. Yui, which is a rambler. Gives them a vigorous root system and really pushes out those long, tall canes. Hybrid teas, Floribundas, grandifloras, climbers, English roses are all grafted. This thing coming out of the ground, this is a sucker of Dr. Yui. If you let this grow, instead of peace on top, there's going to be this little red flower blooming on this. And if you don't get rid of it, it's going to grow and grow and grow because Dr. Yui's a rambler. It's going to be huge, and it may even take over and kill your bush. So when you see this, you really need to rip it out. Not just cut it at ground level, but pull until it rips off the root. So this is one of the problems with grafted roses. Another thing about grafted roses, this little knot here is called the bud union. This is where the graft took place. When you plant this rose, this should be underground. I plant this 2 inches below the ground. This is my soil line. In Maine, they planted 3, and in Canada, 4. In Canada, they would plant this bush like that, burying the bud union by about 4 inches. So this is the drawback of a hybrid tea. If you have hybrid teas at home already and you didn't bury the bud union, next December, mound mulch about 1 foot high around this to protect it. So this is why a lot of people lose their hybrid teas over the winter, because of the graft here. But they're beautiful flowers. There are thousands and thousands of varieties of hybrid teas in every color, every combination of colors. Okay. Now, let's get to the polyantha. There's another group called polyanthus. Is that the fairy right here?
Yeah.
Now the polyantha is a small group of roses that came after the hybrid teas were created. And most garden centers only carry 1 variety, occasionally 2 or 3, but they all carry the fairy. The fairy is a very popular rose all over the Cape. It's a polyantha. It's usually in the shrub section. Landscapers love the fairy rose because it's the easiest rose to grow. You plant it, they walk away, they never come back, and they just grow and bloom every year. They don't need spraying. They're just constantly, they get very large, and I take care of a lot of people's homes with the fairy. So somebody decided to take polyanthers and cross them with the hybrid teas just to see what would happen. And they called them hybrid polyanthers for a few years until somebody thought of a catchy name, Floribunda. Floribundas. So what are these? They're shorter than the hybrid teas, which get to about 5-6 feet, hybrid teas. The polyanthers are low and bushy. This was something in between. There are thousands of varieties of Floribundas. They have a lot more. You can see the difference between the hybrid tea. 4 or 5 canes, one big bloom on each cane. This is more covered in blooms. All Floribundas have a cluster of blooms that we call a spray. We call it a candelabra. Most of the time there will be a circle of blooms at the end of every cane. You can see this is a spray. So you've got the circle of blooms. This is iceberg, and this is superhero. And they're very popular, and they're easier than the hybrid teas to grow. Less prone to disease, less prone to winter kill, but most of them are grafted. Doesn't look like the iceberg is. Looks like an own root.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're own root roses. You can see the difference. This is an own root rose. There isn't that big knot. It's just thin canes coming out of the soil. These don't have to be planted deep. These could be planted just like you see in the pot. So that is what Floribundas are. And at the end we have some catalogs to look through. You get some ideas about other hybrid teas and Floribundas. Yes?
Excuse me, if you're in a nursery, how do you know if there's not a knot under the soil? Like that one?
Because they don't bury it, and there's a reason. To get that bud union under the soil, you'd be chopping all the roots off.
Okay, so
You
we
get
always
this in the pot down there.
If it has a knot, you'll see them.
You'll see it.
Okay.
If it has a knot, you definitely will see it.
Thank you.
And you can see the difference between this and the iceberg, which is an own root. So Floribundas are very popular.
Did you say to spray those or not to spray those? Floribundas.
Again, some of them do get a little black spot, some of them don't. Whether you want to spray, again, is up to the individual. If you have a iceberg at home and you start seeing spots, then you may want to pick up something and start to spray a fungicide. But there are a lot of people with Floribundas that don't.
What do you recommend for a fungus spray?
The Bayer is a good product, unless you want to go organic. Green Cure, Neem, there's a few others that are very good.
The fairy, what's the bloom?
It's a little pink.
But I mean, is it a repeat bloomer? Or
Oh, these are all repeat bloomers.
Okay.
The
Let me
fairy, they don't even deadhead.
Yeah, you don't even have to deadhead, it's just blooms.
And it comes
blooms.
in multicolored,
There are a
isn't
few
it? Or is it
colors,
all
but
pink?
most places carry the regular pink fairy.
But you can find the crystal fairy. I love the crystal
There's a
fairy.
red
It's pretty
fairy.
bright one.
You had a question?
The red
I was
fairy.
wondering about the bloom time, the length of bloom, so I guess you answered it. You said all
Right,
of these.
okay, right. Today, no garden center will sell anything that's only blooming once. It's just not wanted by people and it's not popular anymore. So everything blooms all season. What's all season? Here on the Cape, we're lucky. I've given lectures to garden clubs all over New England, and there are places where they don't stop blooming until the end of June and then finish in September. We stop blooming at the end of May. A few things open at the end of May. Everything is blooming already by mid-June, and a few years ago we were blooming in December. I remember we made the rounds to our customers to do the winter protection in December, and everybody was still blooming, so we waited and we came back. So last year we were blooming through October at least into November in certain things. So we have a pretty long bloom time, so everything blooms over and over again.
Are any of those climbers? I'm looking for a climber that's going to go up the hill.
Yeah, we get the climbers. They have a selection of climbers. Okay, so anyway, Floribundas. Now there's something called a grandiflora. We didn't find it. Okay. They did have Queen Elizabeth here, and what was the other? And Gold Medal, two grandifloras. I think they're out of it, but they may be reordering it. Somebody later on took some Floribundas and crossed them with some hybrid teas and got something called grandiflora. But what's a grandiflora? It still had that cluster of blooms, but now they were giant-sized blooms in clusters, hybrid tea-sized blooms in clusters and circles at the end of every cane, and they're big plants. Queen Elizabeth, which was the first grandiflora, gets 8 feet tall. Your average hybrid tea is 5 to 6, and there's lots of them. Tournament of Roses is another one. So they're very big plants, and you can cut them, or you can just leave them on the plant and have this big cluster of nice big blooms.